I'm Deb Karash, and this is my big black block. I'm going to show you the parts that come with the block and how to use some of them. This is the 4-inch circle. There's a cone, and then there's a 2-inch circle. Each pusher has a matching depression in the block. This little silvery cone is a steel riveting cone. It has a little depression in the top to hold your rivet in place. It's made of Delrin, and the back is flat for stamping and texturing and flattening your metal. So let's move on and make some stuff. So I'm going to make a 4-inch bangle bracelet, and I'm going to start by hammering a texture in the copper. I find it easier to do this while it's all one piece before I cut it out. Once I cut it out and file the edges, I'm going to upset the edge. And you can see I did that before I cut out the center of the bracelet, so that I have that resistance in the center. So I've textured and cut out my silver layer, and now I am just putting in some little depressions to hold my drill in place. I'm doing that with a steel punch, and then I am stamping a little bit of a design around the inside edge. The overall texture on this was just roller printed with some paper just to give it a softness. And now I am going to give it a little more hammer texture. So you can layer your textures. Here I am beveling the holes on one side of the copper ring. And now I'm just going to dome that disc in the 4-inch dab. And you get a nice smooth depression. Now the silver has been roller printed, and so it's a little bit firmer. So I'm just going to start it by laying it over the pusher and just hammering it a little bit just to get it started before I set it into the depression in the block. And because the silver's not quite as soft, I might need to use a weighted mallet to give myself a little bit more power. So now the 2 layers have been finished, and I've put the rivets through the rivet holes and fed them through with a little spacer in between so that it gives a little more dimension. And those are just little pieces of silver tubing. And I'm going to set the rivet head into the depression on that steel riveting cone and cut the rivet. Here's a little different angle. The rivets I'm using here are 20 gauge. If you need to use a larger rivet and you need that depression to be larger, you can make it bigger using a ball burr. And there it is, finished bracelet. And there's very little cleanup. Now I'm going to make a flower form using a really simple shape. I just took a disc and cut in most of the way to the center so that when I set it into the depression in the block and I put the pusher in and hammer it, those petals start to overlap each other. And I'm going to layer that with another shape of flower that I actually shaped using the cone depression. And I'm going to feed my rivets through. I'm going to feed the bail onto the back so that I can rivet all the parts together at one time. One of the great things about the steel riveting cone is that you can reach inside of a deep area and support that rivet head without damaging any of the metal around it, so you won't scratch any of the other areas. Here I'm just making sure that those holes are beveled so that when I hammer my rivet shut, it will be nice and sturdy and locked in place. So now it's all set up and ready to rivet. I like to rivet with the hammer handpiece because it allows me to be really precise. But you can also use a hammer. A small ball peen hammer works best. And that's it, a finished pendant with no solder. One of the other components of the big black block is the cone area, and I like to use it to make larger things like this fun salt cellar. The great thing about the block is that you can put a heavy texture onto your copper and then form it, and you don't lose any of your texture because it's a non-marring surface.